I do think, as an aside, that the focus on the privacy debate will change again, because people definitely want more, and they're realising they're going to have to allow to give more to get more back. And so I think those lines are going to shift as we move along. And speaking of moving along, I'd now like to introduce Dave Wild. Dave is a futurist with Smith & Wild. I always wanted to be one of those. I'm not sure I've got the ability. Dave has a wide experience in strategic planning, leadership development, facilitation, branding, digital strategy, and innovation coaching. And the thing that interests me the most is through his work he's learned that the best way to predict the future is to be one of the ones creating it. So I'm sure we'll learn a lot from him. Dave. Quite bright up here.
Okay, up on screen you can see three giants of the past who have shaped the future, who have changed the way that we do business. At your table you now have 30 seconds to make sure you can identify all three people by name. Go for it. All right, I'm going to pause you there. I'm now about to collect some data, and I have to apologise, it will not be anonymised data. When you hold your hands up, please do it really clearly. Don't do a Kiwi half-hearted kind of. This is for the rest of the room to see. So first of all, if your table got at least one of the names, hand up. Okay, have a look around the room, look for the pattern. Okay, I think we're running at 100%. Okay, hands down. If you got at least two of the names, hands up at the table. Okay, excellent, running at 100%. If you got all three of the names, hands up. Slight variation. Now think back to Mei Chen's conversation about diversity. I'm not going to dive into these though, because these are giants of the past. We're interested in the future. So we're now going to repeat things again, but I would like you to do it with these three giants. 30 seconds. These are the people that are changing the present and the future. Go for it. Name them. 30 seconds. Okay, we're going to repeat the same thing. We're going to do some sampling. This time I will be validating your answers, just to warn you on that small point. So, if you got at least one of them, hands up at the table. Okay, have a look around the room. This is the first time, so I built these figures last night. First time I've run this sample. How did I go there? What was the response rate? Can I just check again? Because it kind of makes the next two questions redundant, yeah? Now, this is something I've learnt over time. You can name Steve Jobs, Anita Roddick, Walt Disney, people who changed the course of history, but they're dead. Some of their lessons are still relevant, but many of them aren't. Meanwhile, this city is being changed by these three people. And you know the work they're doing, but you don't know who they are. If you don't know the people leading those changes, you can't know how they're thinking. If you don't know how they're thinking, you can't apply their thought patterns to your own work. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next 40 minutes. This technique came from a guy called Isaac Newton, who figured out a lot of the universe for us. Notice what he famously once said was, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." He did not say, "I am incredibly smart and I have figured out the universe." So Roger made a great point in that a lot of these things aren't new, but they are new. They're being done in different ways. But if you stand on the shoulders of giants, you can go further, faster. So as a futurist, what I'm really interested in, and when I chatted to John about what we were going to be sort of looking at today, once you build a smart city, what's going to happen is it will no longer be about smart cities. There'll be the next major trend, and then it'll take another decade to catch up to that. But if you look ahead and say, while we're building a smart city, what should we also be building? As leaders, you can drive things forward. As Jim made mention, when I first started out as a futurist, people kind of expected me to have charts and diagrams and show them the trends that were happening, as many futurists do. But my view of that is, if I can show you the trends, then it's not the future, it's the past. So you'll notice when you see growth curves, a lot of those kind of projections are what people are projecting to happen. So I love the diagram internet things, and it kept going up forever. None of those curves go up forever. What I'm really interested in, at what point does it start to tail off, and what's the next S-curve beginning around that? So what I've learned out of that is that the best way to predict the future is to be the people inventing it. That was first said by Alan Curtis Kay, who was in at Apple working on tablet computing well before the iPad. What you need to do is look out for the signals around you. One of the things that experts do is that we're trained to look for the things that validate our own opinion. Think about it. As a human being, you buy a car, all of a sudden you see that model of car everywhere because the brain is pattern matching. So instead what you have to do is look for signals that don't fit into your view of the world and question them in more depth. You have to figure out, is it a signal of a future that's coming, or is it noise that I can safely ignore? What I've learned as a futurist, I do a lot of strategy facilitation because that's just about moving forward into a place you haven't been before, trying to achieve some things that you want to achieve. Or innovation is about creating things that don't already exist. And you can take the future and break it down into 3 time horizons. The first one is future now. And what happens is people get really excited and talk about new ideas and things that they could create. And you have to say to them, brilliant idea, do you know it already exists? It's just because you've been spending too long in meetings talking to the same people about the same sort of things, instead of saying, let's take half an hour of this meeting and go out of the room, talk to the next generation, go onto YouTube, walk into the street, talk to people, and then send the second half of that same 1 hour meeting now creating, instead of what already exists, but what's coming next. The critical time horizon is that third one. You have to have a view of what kind of world do we want to create. Because there's different ways that these things could go on. That conversation around data has a lot of upside, it also has a lot of downside. So as leaders, you have to say, what kind of world do we actually want to create? I've learned a great place to start is to take any word that is critical to your strategy and just understand it better. So for example, I can talk about service. I know what the word service means, but if I dive into the dictionary and break the word down, it gives me clues about how to deliver better service. So we're going to do the same thing with smart, and smart's quite a cool word because it's got a lot of different meanings. I want you to turn to the person next to you. Now, when I say turn to the person next to you, I don't mean go, oh, I have an important email I need to check. I actually mean talk to a human being, okay? That's one of the things as we see the shift and change around the way questions are asked. There's a real upside. The person who might not be comfortable shouting out will type a question in. There's also a real downside. The person being asked the question has zero human interaction with the person asking it. And you could actually see that phenomenon where people asked a question they wouldn't want to ask publicly, but then when the question was asked, who asked that question, the human interaction died away. Neither's better or worse, but you have to cycle between different modes of working. So this one is talk to the person next to you. If you're on your own, a group of 3 is absolutely fine. See how many definitions over 30 seconds you can come up with for the meaning of smart. Go for it. Okay, I'm going to pause you there. Now, we're moving at speed this morning, so I'm not actually going to ask for your definitions. Have a look and see, and I haven't taken all the definitions, but I've got 4 key ones in terms of what we're talking about today. So the first one is when you talk about a human being smart. Quite often that means to have quick-witted intelligence, to be able to think about things very quickly. When we talk about technology, smartphones, smart cities, it's meaning with a device that has been programmed to be capable of some independent action. Now, just by taking those 2 definitions gives you a bit of an insight into how smart technology works and how you lead smartly. Because the device needs to be able to make a decision without the human intervention. So if I want to build a smart team, and I'm saying a smart team of people, how do I get them capable of making decisions independently? Then you can look at it's quick and brisk, as today is running. But the final one I find really interesting. If you have a sharp pain, if something feels sharp, it's a sharp, stinging pain. Is that the kind of city we want to build? So, and I'll touch on the point around humour later on, but what it means is don't just blindly go, smart's the answer to everything. Smart is incredibly important, but there's also a downside to smart. Just like we had that conversation around smart technology for conversations, be aware of the downsides and then work around them. So what I want to do is give you a framework that we're going to use at speed over the next 30 minutes to help you form some thoughts. So I used to be one of those people who would say, oh, don't tell me to write down things, I can remember it all in here. But then I learned over my life that actually what you think is clear up here isn't as clear as you think it might be. So actually putting things down on paper or device or whatever way you do it lets you structure your thinking. So what I'd like you to do is in the middle of the table is a blank A4 piece of paper. We have spared no expense on this event. I'd like to thank our sponsor for their blank A4 pieces of paper. Grab one each. Now what I want you to do is fold it in half. So fold the 2 long edges together and then fold it in half again just so you've got 4 columns marked by a fold line. It also makes this a pocket device far easier to carry it when it's folded up. Okay. We're going to take this concept of leap. So one of the things that I've learned with strategy models and business models is that they are often great in theory, but if people can't remember them, they don't apply them. When people go into meetings and they've learnt a new model, they don't go grab their handbook and they don't even dive into their phones. So this is designed that you can remember. It's the word leap to help you leap forward. But each letter stands for a different way of working. So we're going to begin on the right-hand side. We're not going to start at the left. Can I get you to write at the top of that column the word progress? Why is this so important? Well, I'm 46 and I've learnt this saying through my life, but it's only in the last few years I've gone, I actually understand what it means. You have a look at your meetings. Most meetings do not work with the person walking in saying, here is what we are here to achieve, here is our objective, and actually discussing it to make sure people are clear on that. And I don't mean an agenda, I mean the objective. So what I want you to think about is what are we trying to achieve with a smart city? How does that relate to the council's vision? Just have that running through the back of your mind while I prompt you with a few things to help. Okay, we're going to begin on the left-hand side. So no one knew this leader by name. Has anyone ever heard of a little company called Uber? Yeah? She doesn't lead Uber. Okay? But she leads a company more powerful than Uber. A company in China that is more powerful than Uber. And I'll dive into this. So this is Jean Liu. She's the CEO of Didi Chuxing. When you think of a smart city, when you think of ordering an Uber via your phone, you then start to look at, there's built infrastructure too in terms of how these things come. Now, why is this company significant? Well, the guy, the giant of the past on our opening screen, his legacy, his company just 2 months ago invested $1 billion into Didi Chuxing. And the fascinating thing, I don't have it here, but they talked about it like speed dating. It was actually quite a fast meeting, quite a fast investment, but that gives you a sense of how fast the shift is working. Now, talking about what happened there, Jean Leo talked about the next phase for us is really to invest more in artificial intelligence and machine learning. In an ideal scenario, Didi Chuxing would be able to send drivers out to crowded locations before rides are even requested. So this technique here to move at speed, I'm highlighting in yellow some key thoughts to hold in mind. So yes, artificial intelligence and machine learning is really important, but we know about those kind of trends. The ability to predict ahead is really important. So with Uber, I can see where the car is, but I can't yet walk out and the car's just there without me even requesting it. But that's where these things are shifting towards. Now, I got to go on a study tour end of last year with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise and a group of CEOs. We went through companies like Google and IBM Watson and MakerBot, companies that are changing the world around us. I took 1,500 photos over 4 days. No one else took that same volume of photos, and plenty of people were taking photos, but I was looking for signals of change. When I got rid of all of the dull photos and all of the duplicates, I still had 1,000 photos. Out of those 1,000 photos, that was the most significant one of all. I went to New York, knowing it is the city of yellow taxi cabs. No one had said to me, no, it's the city of black Uber cars circling like sharks. And it was only when I thought it through, why do they circle like sharks? Because the regulations haven't put the infrastructure in place for them to stop anywhere, because the taxis are trying to stop them to do that. So they're burning fuel while they're moving around, while people try and stop that change going on. Another thing that I did that I noticed other people didn't do, I went for a ride in an Uber. Now, I've been in an Uber before, but that's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity at that point to ride with a New York Uber driver. I pity the poor driver who picked me up, who for 30 minutes had me asking him everything I could about it. But here's one thing I learned. The cost of a medallion, a licence to drive a single yellow taxi cab, is $1 million. You think about the revenue for the city that represents. By the way, this full presentation will share anything I show you. There's got clickable links to the full articles, to the full videos. But it was $1 million. It's now $600,000. $400,000, 40% of the revenue wiped out. You think of the budget for your area. 40% of your budget gone from a change people can see coming, but they tried to resist for too long, and they still are fighting this battle. Speaking of battles, we'll now head back over to China. So, this is just this week. Finally, someone got the best of Uber. According to Leo, who heads up Didi Chuxing, Uber has been a grand rival and we have had an epic battle. Each company has been losing $1 billion a year to try and claim that market. This is her words, we raged an earth-shaking war, and when we join hands, our love will last till the end of time. What's she talking about? Well, Uber's just said we're going to pull out of China. Remember, China, huge strategic market to any business. They're instead going to take a 20% stake in Didi so they can focus elsewhere in the world. What does that mean? You have to dive into why are they shifting away from that market? What are the other opportunities that are strategically more important? Now, one of the things about working with me as a futurist is I can be quite a nightmare for conference organisers, because to run a smooth conference, you say to your presenters, please send your presentation through ahead of time so we can check that it works. And you get a polite email back from me going, but I want to be still writing my presentation while other people are presenting. So we have a plan B in place. But May talked about CQ, cultural intelligence. Made me kind of think, we're talking about cultural smarts. If I read that sentence, in your council meetings, do you make statements like, I tell you what, we've waged an earth-shaking war, but when we join hands, our love will last forever. Instead of your brain saying how ridiculous, we should never say things like that, you should be saying, why aren't we saying things like that, and where would it lead to if we do? I just want to have a look here too, in terms of a quick note that I made during the opening, because I was listening to the Waiata. And if you listen to the Waiata, there were two key lines in there. So one of them was Haumai Taringa, which is give me your hand. The second one was mā te aroha, let it be love. Have a look at that quote there in terms of joining hands and let it be love. Some of these things we instinctively know, but we've lost sight of and we're not applying. Okay, now as we all know, smart cities are incredibly important because the future is digital. And I've just been doing some cross-government work in terms of digital leadership. Oh, sorry, wrong slide, that one's got the typo on it. What I meant to say is the future is not digital. That is the past, that is the present. Those trends have been playing out for years. But because you work in complex organisations, because you work at a systems level, it takes multi-year projects to catch up. But what then happens is when you finish that project, you haven't been looking at what comes next, so then there's another multi-year project, instead of paralleling those things together. So for example, when you talk about apps and mobile data, you have to be saying, can that same data be packaged up to be put on people's wrists, to be put in front of their eyes? Because we know that it's coming, but if we're not designing for those things at the same time. How do I know that people will want to put data on their wrists? Because people debate, is Google Glass a failure, or what's happening with wearables? As a futurist, I've learned just look to the past. So anyone here wearing one of those things called a wristwatch? Anyone wearing those things called glasses? Yeah? We put things in front of our eyes. Is time the most valuable thing you could put on your body to guide your behaviour? We've been conditioned to think that it is. The experiment I've been running for the past 6 months is I push the top 3 things from my to-do list to my wrist, but I make sure they're the things that if I got to the end of the day and I said, oh, I haven't done those things. The hard part isn't the technology, it's the human behaviour. So, speaking of human behaviour, I now want to give you a bit of an insight into Uber's strategy. So when they talk about needing to invest in other things, they actually showed where they're heading. So this is the beginning of this year. When you think from a visioning perspective, have a look at this.
Consider the bit, the building block of the digital world. It was invented just 70 years ago, yet in its short life, it has changed the way we communicate, do business, and live almost every aspect of our lives. For Uber, the bit represents our technology. It's complex, precise, and advanced. But when it's expressed, it is effortless and refined. And if you think the bit is a big deal, consider the atom. Born 13.8 billion years ago, the atom is responsible for everything, from the BLT to moms everywhere to New York City. And for us, the atom signifies our rapidly improving cities, the goods we move from place to place, and most importantly, the people we serve. Until a few short years ago, atoms and bits existed in entirely different worlds. But then, something happened. At Uber, we asked, what if we brought these two worlds together? What would that look like? It looks like this. We are able to create safe, low-cost transportation options like Uber Pool and UberX. We are able to create efficient and more reliable ways of getting people the things they need. We are able to deliver fresh-cooked meals from the most popular, iconic restaurants within minutes. And someday, safe, efficient movement of people and things at a giant scale. Most of us don't think about bits or atoms much, if ever. We think about how to get from here to there, the people in our lives, the millions of tiny dramas that play out across the world each day, the human stuff. Uber ultimately succeeds because we think about the human stuff first. But the way we do it, that's our secret. We leave no bit or atom unturned to create industries that serve people, and not the other way around.
So hold on to that thought around the people stuff. So this is trying to imagine, I think it's amazing what's happening down on the waterfront at the moment. So when I walked past, and Auckland Transport shows how many cycles have been past, I thought that's a smart city, that's leading the way, that's where things are going to. But as a futurist, you then say, what comes next? The point where someone goes, oh yeah, everywhere does that. You can start to go that human stuff. Data, numbers, LED counts, those things aren't human. But what if, for imagine, every time a cyclist went past, more of a bit of artwork started to reveal itself, and that showed how we want the city to look. And I can give you an example of that. The motorway barriers that used to just be cast concrete. At a certain point, someone said we could cast anything. What if we brought some of the human stuff to the middle of our motorways? So when you think of smart cities, don't just think numbers and data, think about how do you bring things alive. So what I'd like you to do is on that right-hand side, don't just write in terms of your vision, in terms of your ambition to be the world's most livable city. Because when I do visioning work, when I do purpose work, one of the first things I say to CEOs and exec teams is if we can get people to recite the vision word perfectly, we have failed. Because all people have done is learnt some phrase. They don't believe it, they don't express it in their own words. So I want you, whatever way you talk about creating Auckland as the most livable city, it may have smart integrated in there or not, just write a sentence for yourself. And because we're working at speed, it is okay just to write exactly that phrase, but if something else is running through your mind, it's also fine to draw a picture instead. Picture's worth 1,000 words. It opens up a different way of thinking. Just put something in that right-hand column. This is what you're heading towards. This technique works with any strategy. If you're doing a sales strategy, what do we need to achieve? What's our targets? Put that in the right-hand side. So, for example, some of that earlier work gives me clues. Where's the poetry in life? If you think about the way that Jean Liu was speaking. So maybe rather than smart cities, it's inspiring cities that inspire people forward. Now, feel free to keep writing and drawing while I chat you through the next part. But what I want you to do is over on the left-hand side, put the heading leverage. And this is at the heart of what we're talking about. There is this phenomenon in the world where leaders do not look at what the other leaders who are shaping the world right now are doing and how they think. They don't dig into it early enough. So instead of coming up with your own ideas, first of all, leverage what other people are doing so your creativity goes into creating what comes next. And that's that concept of standing on the shoulders of giants. So as I show you this next section, I just want you to look out for one quote, one idea, one thought. It might even been from other presenters earlier in the morning, but what is something that you can leverage as a leader to help create the world's most livable city in a smart way? So the guy in the middle, just remind me again how many people knew who he was? Here's the beautiful thing, you know his company. Because in the past few weeks, you have seen it everywhere over Auckland. It was even in Jim's presentation this morning. Recognise his handiwork now? Pokemon Go. Augmented reality has been around for a long, long time. Augmented reality is where you take the real world and you overlay digital data. But in the past couple of weeks, we had a tipping point where all of a sudden there was momentum around it. So if you're building a smart city, you have to stop and say, what is it that's driving it? And you have to do it more intelligently than investors. So what happened to Nintendo stock with Pokemon Go is it went up by $9 billion. And then people realised that actually Nintendo doesn't make Pokemon Go. And they have a small ownership stake. And all those investors' money went down. Whose work is it? Well, it's actually the work of John Hanke. So he began a division within Google that became a standalone company called Niantic. He was charged with taking Google's mapping data and doing new things with it. But this is the point of diving into the individuals, not the company strategy. He talks about his personal motivations. So it was around the idea of adding discovery and exercise to gaming. Do we want people discovering Auckland? Do we want people exercising? There are opportunities out of what's happening here. He mentioned a desire to give players a new way to learn about their cities in a new way. But he acknowledges that players also can't help but check their phones every 3 seconds. So this is where a lot of people go wrong. They go, Pokemon Go is terrible, people are looking at their phones everywhere, it's causing safety habits, I'm not going to get involved with it. Really easy to be negative. The brain is trained in critical thinking. What you have to do is, yep, those are all the bad reasons. Now what's the upside and how can we leverage the upside? So if you dig into it further, he talks about, I want the contact lenses that turn in the world into whatever I want it to be, he said. That's probably going to get created in our lifetime and I'm looking forward to it. So here's someone closely involved in the industry saying there is a technology, in his estimation, is happening over the next couple of decades. One of the things about doing infrastructure work like you do, you have to have really long time horizons. You're not a small agile software company that can go, here's the latest trend, let's implement it next week. He then talks about, I see a progression of wearables that get more sleek and sexy over time. It's not binary, where you don't have augmented reality one day and then you do have it the next. I've highlighted that phrase, it's not binary. So these aren't decisions around, is it a good thing or a bad thing? It's how do we make use of the parts we want to. The wider mega trend around this, so for a few years I was calling it blended reality. It's now got to the point where there's a general term for it and people are calling it mixed reality. At one end of the spectrum, you have virtual reality, where the physical world falls away almost completely. In the middle, you have augmented reality, where the things are mixing together. But here as a futurist, I can't show you Pokemon Go because that's already big and it's already happening. A number of you will have seen Google's work on Google Cardboard. And if you haven't experienced Cardboard, you need to make sure you get it. So for $25, order a piece of cardboard, fold it up, drop a smartphone in there, and you can have virtual reality. If you imagine, as May was talking about, people overseas saying, what is it like to stand in Auckland? It just shifts your perspective. But what comes next? Well, earlier this year, just a couple of months ago, Google announced this product. So this is Google Cardboard Plastic. Take a look at this.
The things that make virtual reality compelling have been with us for tens and hundreds of thousands of years. At its core, it's about storytelling. Everything along the way is a step towards trying to get more immersed in the experience and more immersed in the story. But, we're still putting something between you and the world.
What we really wanted to do was to make something feel real. And so this is the first headset for actual reality.
Perfectly.
What's realer than real? Probably nothing. Or maybe something. I doubt it though. I think we're done.
Now, I wasn't planning to present from and it's not really helping with the camera work, I have to admit that. But this is about getting immersed in things. And it's occurred to me, as I was standing up there, I'm totally non-immersed in the audience. I can't even really see you, to be honest. Part of the reason for standing here is I've seen the clip before, but I don't know how you're interpreting it. Now, I have the advantage of, yes, that was April the 1st, funnily enough, was the date they announced that product. And when I tried to order it here, for some reason, they don't seem to be available online. So this is a joke product, but the point about humour is this. You think about how laughter works. It's when two unexpected ideas collide together. You don't laugh because you saw it coming, and it creates positive value. Innovation is taking ideas that you normally wouldn't put together, colliding them, and creating new value. So what I've learned is in any meeting where there's laughter, instead of doing what business normally does and organisations normally do, laugh and then say right back to the serious work, pause on the laughter and say what opportunity does that uncover? Because that shows the next mega trend that's happening. So this whole kind of thing of the interface dropping away. So when I talk about putting data in front of your eyes and on your wrists, I'm still living in the past a bit. What if that all dropped away? Because that's what that shows. Now, on that study tour I mentioned, went through Google, and I've been through Google in Silicon Valley before, but this was Google in New York, and this is where engineering is headed up by a New Zealander, Craig Neville Manning. While we were talking with him, I used Google to ask him a question. So I Googled to see how old Google was and said to him, now Google's 17 years old. This is October last year. You're hardly a new business, but what's your personal take on what comes next? And to answer it, he dropped into his own personal life. So out of what the business is working on, he said, well, I'll tell you what, I've just bought an Amazon Echo. And if you're not familiar with Amazon Echo, it's the device that sits in your home and you just say, hey, Alexa, what's the weather? Hey, Alexa, can you order me this product? Hey, Alexa, what time is the bus arriving outside of my house? And he said, I was amazed at how much I like it. We've just bought a second one. October of last year. What he didn't say, and because Amazon's got ahead of us, we've got a team of developers frantically working on Google Home, which has just been announced at the last developers conference. It's not shipping yet, but it's catch up there. Now there's a huge difference in approach there at a human level. Siri, Cortana, Alexa, they have all given the devices human names. Google has said we don't want it to have a personality, we're going to call it Google Home. Who's right or wrong? I don't know. Dive into it and explore. So what I want you to do is in that left-hand column, out of the things you've heard this morning, just write down one insight, one thought, something that's been triggered off by a giant that you've heard from, whether it was May from in the room or one of the people from here. Just a thought. I'll give you a moment around that. And for anyone who's not writing, here's my challenge to you. Out of a stream of things, if you can't identify something that you don't already know or is an angle you wouldn't normally follow, you're not challenging your own thought patterns a look, or you're not looking at the world wide enough. Relief is everyone's writing, so it works really nicely. Now at this point, I have to confess, I'm an eternal optimist. There is no way I'm going to get through all the slides I had here. And I normally don't rehearse, but I did last night. I time checked and I thought I could just hit it, but I can't. So what I'm going to do is skip through and show you what I think the critical things are. I'm running beautifully on time, I'd like to announce to everyone. Much appreciated. And we will talk about agility, so that fits in beautifully. So for example here, for me looking at those giants, I kind of thought, what does a smart city mean? This thing of being more integrated. Is an organic city what comes next? Okay, so once you've leveraged some information, again, if you were working on a challenge, you know, how do we best communicate in multiple languages to Aucklanders? You'd begin on the right-hand side to say, our vision is that whenever someone receives information from council, they can understand it. Then you say, who's had to solve this challenge before? And really quickly you can go, whoa, Skype's doing a lot of stuff in multi-language translation. I don't even know who founded that or who's working in the translation department. Who's that person and what insights do they have? Then you get some of their knowledge. Now you want to invent the future. So the next stage is write the second column in, explore. This is where your mind starts to play with possibilities. Again, in a longer session, I'd have you talking and bouncing ideas off each other, but I'm just going to show you the principle here. Key to exploring is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. So that's why, for example, I have to apologise for being slightly rude, for pushing people forward, saying you need to write something, you need to do this, you have to push beyond your comfort zone. Which brings us to the third person. Now you might not recognise Joe Gebbia, but you will know the company that he and his two co-founders founded, that all began with an air mattress that Joe had in the boot of his car. And 3 penniless students said, I think we can make some money by renting out our lounge floor. That resulted in Airbnb. Now, one of the things about these companies is that their statistics and their numbers change so fast, it's quite difficult to hold them in your head. So I wanted to make sure that I'm quoting for you, up-to-date information. So Airbnb now has 2 million rooms around the world. 2 million rooms. You think about the size of the city, you think about the number of rooms they have. They are in 57 cities. Sorry, I got that wrong, 57,000 cities. So you think about this, we're talking about working on a scale of one city, they're working on a scale of 57,000 cities across 191 countries. And what I found most fascinating is every night there are 500,000 people staying in an Airbnb room. So when you talk about housing, when you talk about social communities, here is a company to study. More than that, study the thinking of the people leading it. Now, the bell curve is incredibly important when it comes to innovation and creating the future. So often, we like to hang out in the middle. And in a world of big data, that's where a lot of comfort lies. Yes, lots of people want this. Yes, lots of people are buying that. Yes, this is where the opportunity lives. But this is where you still need the human beings, because the human beings are the ones who have that risk, who say, I'm really interested in the fringes, where the future begins. Because smart actually lives on the edges. And a passing comment I wanted to make, but it's an absolutely critical one, is you can't just talk about smart cities. You can't just talk about who are the people we want to attract, because that's not what society's about. That's not what community's about. The people on the other edge as well. So I've done some work with Auckland Transport and the Southern Initiative. I've seen, and people sit in rooms and go, everyone has a smartphone. I have to say to people, why don't you go get on a bus and go out to Manukau and actually see if that's real. I don't mean look at some data, go and see it. And you do start to go, oh, more people had devices than we thought. Oh, but they don't actually have any data. Oh, this one family of 8 people pass a tablet between them. So you have to think about, in a world of data, both those things. What I do love about the Internet of Things, and again, I'll use that sign with the data on it, it starts to make things more accessible for everyone. Now, this is diving into the thinking of Joe Gebbia, and this is earlier this year. He shared what it was like to live on the edge of the bell curve with this risky, unproven idea. Have a listen to this. It's 3 minutes long.
Here's what we pitched investors. We want to build a website where people publicly post pictures of their most intimate spaces, their bedrooms, the bathrooms, the kinds of rooms you usually keep closed when people come over. And then, over the internet, they're going to invite complete strangers to come sleep in their homes. It's going to be huge. We sat back and we waited for the rocket ship to blast off. It did not. No one in their right minds would invest in a service that allows strangers to sleep in people's homes. Why? Because we've all been taught as kids, strangers equal danger. Now, when you're faced with a problem, you fall back on what you know, and all we really knew was design. In art school, you learn that design is much more than the look and feel of something, it's the whole experience. And we learned to do that for objects, but here, we were aiming to build Olympic trust between people who had never met. Could design make that happen? Is it possible to design for trust? I want to give you a sense of the flavor of trust that we were aiming to achieve. I've got a 30-second experiment that will push you past your comfort zone. If you're up for it, give me a thumbs up. Okay, I need you to take out your phones. Now that you have your phone out, I'd like you to unlock your phone. Now hand your unlocked phone to the person on your left. That tiny sense of panic you're feeling right now is exactly how hosts feel the first time they open their home. Because the only thing more personal than your phone is your home. People don't just see your messages, they see your bedroom, your kitchen, your toilet. Now, how does it feel holding someone's unlocked phone? Most of us feel really responsible. That's how most guests feel when they stay in a home, and it's because of this that our company can even exist.
I wasn't planning to get you to do it for real. That was a thought that I had when I walked over there. I've presented this clip before. I've never done it for real before. I thought, why not take a risk and do it on scale with 100 people? So much better, okay? So you got to experience those feelings yourself. The other thing that I got to watch was some human behaviour. The data could never tell me. So I got to watch some people asking for their phones back before he instructed it, yeah? The key point he's trying to make there is not the fear that you feel, but how do the people looking after it feel? Because often with Airbnb, people go, oh, that would never work because of this. And that demonstrates this principle. This isn't about Uber, this isn't about Airbnb, this isn't about the sharing economy, this is about new ways of thinking and working. Now, why is Airbnb so important? Well, just this week, they announced that they've launched a new innovation centre they're calling Samara, and they are pushing into urban planning. I think that kind of relates to the work that you do a bit. So what they talked about is that they're building a communal housing project designed to revitalise. And have a look at this picture here. Why this is so significant is Airbnb is the world's largest accommodation provider, and they own no buildings until today, okay? So instead of doing catch up to that wave, you can say, what are they learning now? Diving into it further, again, I'm just top-lining things. The yellow quotes, most of them won't be of interest, but if something is, follow the link and dive into it. After this project, they're going to look to scale it across the world. Joe Gebbia said, what excites me is that we can apply what we've learned over the last 8 years to create new types of commerce and new types of social change. You're in the business of social change, but here's Airbnb, a new company that's 8 years old. Now, what I find particularly fascinating is when you dive in behind the scenes and go, how did that project begin and why? The project was inspired by an older woman in rural Japan who started up an Airbnb dwelling. Her neighbours thought she was crazy and wondered why anyone would visit. But visit they did, attracted by the charms of small-town Japan. That led the woman to enlist her neighbours as hiking guides, translators and tour guides. What started as a lark brought a miniature tourism economy to a once moribund place. So the next time you're in a meeting and someone has an idea that you go, that's crazy, I want you to pause and go, oh, is that the crazy on the edge that's the beginning of the next wave that doesn't fit with my conventional way of looking at this? So as I move into the last few minutes and close out, this principle here comes back to the bell curve as well. What everyone else already knows is in the middle. I'm not saying forget everything that you already know. Really important you don't turn up to work and go, I have no idea what I'm doing. Business as usual is incredibly important, but at the same time, you need to look for the brilliant ideas. The problem is, it's often difficult to spot and impossible at the beginning whether an idea is crazy or brilliant. Again, I can think back to that opening giant, Steve Jobs. They famously ran a campaign, here's to the crazy ones. I facilitated an e-government meeting between 4 nations earlier this year, and it was New Zealand, UK, Estonia, and South Korea. At the end of the meeting, the Vice President of e-government from the Republic of Korea came up to me and handed me their strategy document. Looking for signals of the future, looking for cultural differences, what I found fascinating about the title and going through the document is it says, enjoy your e-government. In New Zealand, when we write strategy and action plans, we don't typically talk about this needs to be an enjoyable strategy, yeah? But if you want people to engage and be excited, the analytical mind, the logical mind is only one half of your brain, and the more dominant one actually looks for enjoyment. So there is a clue in that. So what I want you to do when you're out of this session, over lunch, whenever you kind of do it, but think about some of these things that you're hearing and talking about and play with ideas in that space. So if I try and push my brain to the edge, I go, actually, maybe after smart cities comes compassionate cities. And what might that look like and how might that work? The final part, which is just a couple of instructions around things, is the most critical column. You have to write action. It's really easy to give presentations, to have conversations, to make up ideas. It's really difficult to move them forward, and that's what innovation and creating the future involves. And what I've learned is that doing is the smartest kind of thinking. So as Roger talked about, that ability to do things quickly, don't think you're in an implementation mode. You're still just in a thinking and planning mode, but you're now approaching it in a far smarter way. And this is the guy who encapsulates it. Who's this a picture of? Yeah, this is young Mike Tyson, the youngest ever heavyweight champion of the world, who famously once said that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. What he meant by that is when you try and predict what's going to happen, your brain can't figure it out. So instead, you have to get out there and just do it. I'm going to close here. This clip I can't actually show you, but it's about agility, and it's a series of documentaries that Microsoft has produced around the agile organisation. The beauty of it is, though, is that my big frustration in terms of inventing the future of presentations is that PowerPoint is a linear process. It predicts where I want to go. I need to be able to move far more agilely. So behind the scenes, I am prototyping and building and experimenting with using OneNote as a database that has all of these clips in it, links to all of them, along with lots of other things that are incredibly relevant. Like President Obama talking at South by Southwest Digital Festival this year, talking about how do you accelerate government. If you're interested in having free access to this, because I'm just testing out how it works, just message me in some sort of way and happy to let you browse through those things. Thank you very much for the extra time, hugely appreciated. What I'd like to ask you all to do is keep in mind for today, don't let change happen to you, actually be that change. Lead it, make it happen by standing on the shoulders of giants. Thank you.
I'm just going to go out there and guess that there might be some questions, and I'm sure we can be 5 minutes late for lunch. So, does anybody want to ask Dave anything? I thought that was really thought-provoking. Oh, sorry. I should look.
Hi, I'm Matt from Becker. Just one question I have is around consolidation. So around the world we see Microsoft buying up companies, and we're getting these sort of big global companies. Do you have a view on that and how that will effectively dull innovation or grow innovation?
Yeah, I like to kind of think of it at a systems point of view and kind of think about just the human patterns and what happens sort of in nature around that. So I think businesses and organisations in the world at large goes through cycles. And you see it with New Zealand companies as well. People go, we're far too big, we're far too slow. A new CEO comes in and goes, I'm going to break it all up into separate units so we can move with more agility and greater innovation. And then people go, oh, this is really inefficient. There's lots of double up and that sort of thing. And the next person comes in and brings it all back in together. So if I look at Microsoft, and they had a change in CEO 2 years ago to Satya Nadella, they shifted from a culture of we know it all to actually innovation is happening out there. So they're going through that cycle there. Absolutely, what it can do is dull or slow down innovation. That's a natural part of the innovation. Thing I like to hold in mind, neither's right nor wrong, they're different strategies. So for example, for Auckland Council, you'd be saying, what point are we at in that cycle? And I really like some of the things that I was hearing in terms of we connect, we enable, but there's other people to connect in with. Great stuff.
There are two things online. One asks how to get in touch for the presentation, so the slides for today are all available after this, and so you'll be able to get those.
And that was me asking myself. That was just
and I'll make sure that the way to get hold of Dave in terms of the OneNote stuff he spoke about is available as well. Failing fast, how practical in a large, risk-averse, politically governed organisation?
That is a brilliant question to close out on, because I have a real theory on failing fast. So I do a lot of innovation work, and I used to quote the usual mantra that first came from A.G. Lafley, who drove innovation as CEO at Procter & Gamble. And he famously once said, what you want to do is you want to fail early, you want to fail cheaply, and you want to fail fast, right? So in other words, do something, do it in this meeting. If people don't like doing their phones, never do it again. So I quoted that mantra, but what I learned is it's far too ingrained in us not to fail. And how I learned that is I started to say to HR directors, what's your metric around failure? What's your KPI? Are people calling people in and going, you're not failing enough, I need you to increase your rate of failure? And I have never met an organisation yet that's doing it. So it's just a real lip service thing. But the same schools that taught us not to fail also taught us that scientists are very smart. And scientists run experiments. And you don't run an experiment because you know the answer. You run the experiment because it might work or it might not. So the language changes. I now just talk to people about run experiments. Run early experiments to get early data to make decisions from. And it's a great way of working. Cool, thank you.
So Dave, thank you. So look, that was great. We're going to have lunch now. Lunch is until 1:30. I guess what you've heard this morning from Roger and I is there's a lot that we are doing, that we are thinking about. I think to link up to that last chat about failure, we have to believe, even though we are in a big politically organised business, that it is okay to fail. If all of our team believe the only answer is we must succeed at everything we do, we will be the most risk-averse, conservative outfit you've ever seen. And that cannot be the way to be agile and quick and doing some of these new things. From May, we heard about the cultural quotient and that thinking about diversity and how we embrace that. And from Dave, I guess, to close for lunch, really standing on the shoulders of giants and going out there to invent the future, I think are really good things to think about. So look, enjoy lunch. I look forward to a chat with you all and see you back after. Hold on, I think Jim wants us. You can't get enough Jims.
Just before we go for lunch, we're very lucky to have a lunch sponsor, EnviroNZ. Thank you to all of our sponsors. We'll mention you as many times as we can. Remember to look in your brochure. Remember to go out and meet with them. But especially now, EnviroNZ and Wayne Plummer is going to come and send you off to your lunch. So round of applause, please, for Wayne.
Hi all. I won't keep you long. Dave, that was absolutely inspirational. I'm not sure that the waste industry can sort of compete with that sort of stuff. I had a few words here to say. Firstly, John, thanks for the invite to be able to stand up here today and actually sponsor the lunch. EnviroNZ, or you might know us as Enviro Waste Services. Our brand's been around a long time. We've had a long-term innovative partnership with Auckland Council since we commenced our waste and recycling services about 16 years ago. 25 years I've been in the waste industry and a lot has changed. Maybe not smart like all this sort of stuff, but some pretty cool stuff. What is it next in the waste industry for us? Where are we going to go? What's the next smart initiative? Is it food waste to power, plastics to diesel, waste to energy, tyres to fuel rather? I don't know where it's going to go, but I hope it does go somewhere and it goes fast. Technologically speaking, though, in the last couple of years, we have had some smarts put into our business. Waste isn't any longer collected by the Garbo and the local rugby league team throwing bags in the back of the trucks. Our latest trucks have got they collect microchipped wheelie bins. We've got 6 cameras, videos and stills, so we can see what you're sticking in your rubbish, or you're recycling, or you're not. The truck looks more like an A380 cabin, more like an aircraft. So many dials and digits and what have you. And the driver's now a technician, more akin to that of a pilot. We're still working on the autopilot function though. Lastly, food waste, the hot topic at the moment. Waste Mins, our sector's governing body, has recently launched a campaign called Love Food, Hate Waste. As a country, we throw out 122,000 tonnes of food waste every year, 213 jumbo jets full. Have a look at the website, www.lovefoodhatewaste.co.nz for some great initiatives. And on that note, on behalf of EnviroNZ, I invite you to lunch. Eat smart.